Okay, hello and welcome back to Before the Blow Up. My name is Sama and today I'm joined by the lovely Tissa Rahim. Rahim, I feel like I need to say it the Persian way, Rahim. The Persian powerhouse, which is your catchphrase, and I love it. I think it's so fitting and needed. Um, Today we have some juicy, I think there's some good conversation we can have, not only about your music, but what's going on in the world that's connected close to our hearts. But before we jump in, do you want to tell the listeners a little about yourself and your background and, your music and stuff?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me and for that lovely intro. My name's Tissa, and I'm a singer that does Persian and English influenced R&B and soul music. I have kind of a random background. I was born in Austria, but my family's all Persian. So I didn't even speak a word of German until I started kindergarten. I spoke Farsi at home. And then we moved here when I was 14. So a dorky teenager who couldn't really speak English very well, forced to leave. But I'm very happy that we're in Vancouver now, because it's definitely a better place in terms of like music opportunities and things like that.
How old were you when you moved from Austria to Vancouver?
I was 14.
14. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's a like prime age. And I feel like, what was it? High school? You went straight into high school at 14?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
grade 9. Yeah, I was at my peak
Yeah.
awkwardness, and
Mm,
add on top of that I didn't speak the language fluently, so
mm,
didn't really help. Yeah.
definitely a shift. Interesting that your first language, I mean, it makes sense that it was Farsi, but you didn't learn German until going into kindergarten. So that must have also
Yeah.
been like a transition of learning new language and then moving to Canada, learning English. So
Yeah.
you had to make a lot of adjustments.
I consider myself lucky in the way that I learned the languages because I was just so embedded into the culture that I had no choice but to learn it. Like, for example, my parents, they moved from Iran in their 20s to Austria with like zero German knowledge. And then again to Canada, and I guess they were in their 40s again with like very little English knowledge, and they were able to learn it pretty well. So I consider myself pretty lucky that I had no choice. I had basically no choice but to have to learn it. So
Yeah, definitely a blessing now, no being
yeah,
trilingual, yeah, but in the
didn't
process it can
yeah.
be a little, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, yeah, during the time I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah,
I
I
was
bet. No. Yeah,
it made me kind of feel like an outsider too, if we want to get into that whole
totally.
thing. But
Yeah, no, please.
yeah,
Yeah,
'cause I
tell me
was
about
already
that.
yeah, I was already like, considered, the foreign girl for being
Mm,
Persian. And
mm,
it felt kind of different in Austria versus Canada in kind of an interesting way. So like in
right.
Austria, it was made very obvious to me that even though I was born there, I wasn't really
Mm,
an Austrian person,
mm,
which like going to a school where there was maybe like five other people from like not Europe. It felt kind of isolating because at that age, all you want to do is just fit in, right? And it's kind of
yeah.
difficult to do that. That being said, I did have, a good group of friends and everything. It wasn't like the worst thing, but there were definitely pretty often those like underlying tones, even from my teachers sometimes.
Mm,
When I moved here, at first I didn't really notice it, but I realized at the time that I moved here from Austria, there was a girl that moved here from Switzerland at the same time. So they're like neighboring countries. And she was kind of introduced into the like circles in high school, like immediately, and I wasn't. And at the time, I was like,
mm,
oh, there must be something wrong with me. But now looking back at it and like kind of understanding things a little bit better, I realize it's because probably she looked more like the kids in school than I
mm.
did. But at the time, it's not like something that I thought about. It's something you definitely internalize.
Totally. Oh my God, I can't relate to that more. In my experience, I'm I had two. I mean, our story is really interesting. Our stories like kind of match, but I was born in England,
Mm,
moved to Iran when I was 2, and then at the age of 6 moved to Canada.
right.
So I mean, I was younger, which I think is a blessing because I'm so little that it's easy to learn and adjust whatever. Um, but in terms of, I think the shift from moving to Canada in the sense of feeling just wanting to belong, uh,
Yeah.
and
That's
just
all we wanted as
wondering,
kids.
yeah, exactly. And it sucks, like the feeling, it makes me emotional because um at the time you're just looking back, I feel so sad for my, child self, but it's obviously made me who I am, and I'm so grateful, and I've learned a lot through the experience. But it was definitely hard. And yeah, you're like, what's wrong? One of the things, I mean, I'm sure you had something similar, but for me was my hair. I had really
Hmm.
short curly hair,
Hmm.
and I remember first grade, every morning going to school, I'd be in tears because I'd be like, oh, my hair's not long and blonde like the other girls. Like, oh, like what do I do to make it look like theirs? And then I didn't have very many friends in the first grade. And then over the summer, going into the second grade, my hair grew out and it was long. And then I would straighten it, and the treatment, and I swear it's from the hair, like the different treatment I got after my hair was long. Everyone wanted to be my friend all of a sudden, and I had straight long hair. Like,
Hmm.
it's just like interesting things like that. And
Yeah.
like you said, there's another Switzerland girl who came, and she kind of fit in right away. For me, it was this girl that moved from Toronto. Um, and she like made friends right away. She was this white
Right.
girl, whatever. And I was like, oh, like what am I doing different?
Exactly.
And that stuff sticks
And
with you. Yeah.
it really does. It takes a lot of unlearning.
Mhm.
But first of all, your hair is beautiful.
Thank you.
But I had actually a very, very similar experience to that. I have naturally, like right now, I don't on the camera, but I have naturally curly hair
Mm,
too. And I noticed that when I started straightening my hair, and also when I lost weight, because, I grew up in that sort of Kate Moss, like skinniness is king era.
mm.
All of a sudden, yeah, I was getting more attention from the
Wow.
people in my grade and stuff
Yeah.
that weren't like my immediate friends already. They were
Mhm.
like, oh, you look great. Like, what have you been
Right.
doing? And but yeah, I definitely there's definitely some instances where I was made to feel very different, or I was just
Mhm.
assumed to be without even. I think it was maybe the unfairness that bothered me. I was
Mhm.
like, at least give me a chance, but
Yeah.
because I didn't even make my case. But like now I don't really go through life like that at all anymore. Which is great. Like you kind
Yeah.
of turn that into your power. Like I'm not going around trying to prove myself to
Mhm.
people. And I think that's how you should go through life.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. That's I fully agree. So how did that were you kind of bringing it back to music? You did your experiences like that kind of push you to express yourself through music, or was that something that came later in life, and you had your experiences and whatnot, and then you found
Yeah, I think so. I think music always went hand in hand with that because
it?
I was definitely one of those really shy kids who like didn't really know how to. I was always kind of emotional, but like didn't know how to express that emotion properly. So
Mhm.
I would always put it into music or writing or poetry or something like that. And but it wasn't until kind of like I always kind of people just kind of thought I had a good voice and had sort of a talent for music, but it wasn't until sort of like end of high school that I started to sort of see it as something that I really want to do all the time. And at that time, I joined a band at like
Mm.
18, 19. And it was actually a pretty interesting first experience with like the music industry because we got to do some really cool things. We got signed to this label and we got to go on this like 40 city US and North America tour. But like
Wow.
not to continue on like the sad path, but it was also kind of a bad experience because I was in a group with a bunch of guys who thought it would be funny to like, be sexist and racist towards me.
Mm,
So,
mm.
um, unfortunately,
Wow.
that kind of scarred my first introduction into the music industry.
Right. Right.
And then I kind of took off well, I didn't really take off. I never really stopped making music. It just was always a part of me. But I went to school. So while I was in that band, I was doing my bachelor's degree here at the University of British Columbia in
Mhm.
science. So I completely, you know how Persians are, we're always like, the art is like a side thing.
Yeah.
Like we always have to do some
Exactly.
sort of like doctor, lawyer, engineer, or
Yeah.
something like that. And then I went and did my master's degree in that. But I realized that like a couple of years down the line, I realized like, why should I let an experience like that deter me from doing what is like my passion in life? I'm not gonna let that be the
Yeah.
reason why I stop doing what I love to do.
Yeah.
So
Good for you. That's not an easy
thanks.
decision to make.
It was not. Yeah, it involves a lot of like believing in yourself and
Mhm,
all that self-love and all that stuff that we talk about a lot these days.
mhm.
But it didn't come naturally at the time. It's definitely talked about more now. So
Right,
I'm
right.
like I'm hoping that future generations are now that's sort of more of what they grow up with. But it definitely wasn't something we talked about when we were growing up.
So how did you find the courage? You know, because I feel like conversation really helps and propels one to, you know, pursue what their dream is, you know, because they've talked, you know, especially with, as you said, self-love. The more conversation there is, the more encouragement it is to practice it, for
Hmm.
instance, and partake in it. Um, but what was a key factor in you, I guess, believing in yourself and finding that self-love?
Honestly, I think it was partly encouragement from like those around me, like my friends who believed in me and my family who believed in me. And then like getting to enter those music circles again and realizing that oh, I do have something to bring to the table here and
Mm,
people want to work with me and they want to keep working with me. And then the other part, literally just taking the leap, like realizing that one thing that I always try to think about is like when I'm scared of something, that's often a sign that I should do it, you
mm,
know? So I try to, I feel like putting yourself slightly out of your comfort zone is where you grow. So I
mm.
just kind of decided I'm going to put myself out of my comfort zone here and share the music that I've written. And it might not be perfect and it's not going to be the best thing I've ever done or will ever do. But it's like you can't just always expect to be doing everything perfectly, right? Like the point of it is to
Exactly.
learn and to continue to become better and to continue to learn and grow.
1000%. I love that. When you're scared of something, that's when you know you should do it. I'm gonna
Yeah,
that's gonna
obviously
stick with me.
within reason.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
You
scared
can
to jump
trust
off a
yourself.
cliff.
You can trust yourself, like trust your
Yeah,
intuition on that.
yeah, definitely. Um, so you did the band thing at 18, was it?
Mhm.
And you did your tour, which was kind of a rough experience for you, and then you decided to go solo and whatnot. Um, what when did you? I'm curious to know when you came up with the Persian Powerhouse, because uh, we can speak more on this, but I don't know if you felt this way, but I felt like through my years of being in Canada and having all my family back in Iran, I find myself in this identity crisis of, for instance, through high school, I really went through resenting the Persian culture. I tried
Mhm.
to disassociate with being Persian whenever someone would ask me where I'm from. I'd be like, oh, like, first thing I would say is I was born in England. My family's
Mm.
like Persian. I would like say it really slight-handedly. So then, you know, tried not to bring too much attention to it. And then now as I'm getting older and I guess like maturing and realizing there's nothing to be ashamed of, I'm trying to embrace it more. My point being, there was a lot of identity struggle and trying to figure out who I am in relation to my culture and like my roots of someplace I didn't grow up in.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like I feel like the Persian powerhouse, it's like so powerful and it's like making a statement, you know, it's like I'm Persian and I'm not afraid to show it. And I just want to know how your experience of, you know, finding that came.
Yeah, so again, I think I went through a pretty similar experience to you growing up. I think it was a result of the sort of a bit of racism that I experienced in elementary school and like a bit later in school that kind of made me want to disassociate from it as well. Again, because like at that point, you're not really taught, nor do you really understand like this is systematic discrimination or racism or whatever, you know, you just kind of think, oh, there must be something wrong with me, you know. And so I did do a bit of that dissociation as well. And the other thing that I realized I was doing at the time is like I love our culture and I love where we're from, but just like with anywhere else, there are issues and there are things that we always try to make better. But because of the way that I grew up, I felt almost uncomfortable bringing it up at all
Mm.
because I felt like there it kind of lacks, or at least it used to lack that nuance of understanding like there are issues, but it doesn't mean that there's something wrong in general with our society. Like we kind of weren't given that individualism. Like we're not given. I don't know if I'm expressing myself properly, but just
No,
we're
I
kind of
understand.
treated as a monolith. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
it's like one whatever the country does, it
exactly.
like reflects
So
on its people when it's
yeah.
completely not like that.
So
Yeah.
in me wanting to criticize, like for example, let's say mandatory hijab. Sometimes I would worry that that's coming across as me saying like all of Iran is like we have a issue, But what I meant by that is like we do have some things that we need to work on, but there are a lot of things about our culture that we can be really proud of. It's like old and historic, and there's so much beauty in it. And I think the way that the Persian Powerhouse came about was so actually my producer gave me that name because we were in the studio and he just like kind of felt like it was appropriate for my voice. And I never really, at the beginning of my career, I never really thought of myself as having like a Persian influence in my music at the beginning. But the more I started singing it, and it's actually people outside of myself that started pointing it out to me, like, oh, when you sing, I know you're singing in English right now, but it kind of feels like there's something extra to it.
Mhm.
And so I just kind of leaned into it. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but I actually come from a family of Persian musicians. So it kind of
You
makes
did.
complete sense.
Wow.
And it's kind of looping it all together. It's like calling myself the Persian powerhouse is also kind of allowing me that individualism, like I am a person from Iran and I sing in this style. But that doesn't mean that everyone else is like this, like I'm honored to be a representative of my culture, but also realizing that there's so much to our culture, that there's no way that one person would represent all of it. But yeah, I don't know if that
Definitely.
made sense, but
Yeah, no, I love that. That's so beautiful. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I totally agree because when I saw you perform live, because I think when I first initially met you, I wasn't sure if you were Persian because your
hmm
name, we talked about it,
yeah.
isn't Persian,
hmm
or it's Tissa. You can give a
Yeah,
little
my
background.
my full name is actually Tissa in
Right.
Farsi, and it's an amalgamation of a Mazandarani word
Hmm.
with my mom's name. So my mom's name is Atusa, and so she wants to
Right.
be Titisa. Yeah, but I
Yeah.
say Tisa because it's easier.
Yeah.
People don't trip over it. I just like I just like I have cringe moments from like my past when the teacher would read the list and it would just like get to
Get
my
your
name and
name.
they would just have horror in their eyes. And not that I'm necessarily trying to make it easier for other
Right.
people to, but I
Yeah.
don't know, it's just easier. I
Right.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's why I go with Tisa.
Yeah. And yeah, I remember seeing your name and I was like, I wonder if she's Persian. And then you sang the Persian song
Yeah.
Ege Yeruz and like
hmm
my heart just melted. It was so
Oh,
beautiful.
thanks.
Um but yeah, and like even in your English songs, like yeah, there it's definitely true that you have some Persian, I don't even know what it is. It's just like underlying
Yeah.
Persian accents to your
I love
music.
that. I'm
Yeah,
so
which I
happy to hear
love.
that that's what
Yeah.
people hear. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think it's so. My dad always tells me, he's like, "Oh, like we need an artist like that, that like sings
No.
English, so it's like for the English crowd, but then there's some like
hmm
underlying Persian um, representation, so like the Persian people can enjoy it as well." You know.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I'm trying to do here, and in a way
Hmm.
that's authentic to me, and it feels very authentic to me.
Hmm.
Because, like, let's say if I was purely doing Persian music, like, I could do that, but it's not really authentic to my experience as a Persian immigrant.
Right.
And I'm
Yeah.
kind of trying to represent that we all have kind of different experiences as immigrants from Iran. And this is kind of
Definitely.
what's natural to me, what feels
Yeah.
right for me.
Um, Kind of bringing up what's going on right now. I'll give a little background, and please feel free to add to it if anything comes
hmm
up for you. But for those listening who maybe aren't aware of what's going on in Iran right now, there's a, I want to call it a revolution. There's a revolution
Yeah.
happening. What sparked it was that this girl named Mahsa Amini was detained by the morality police, the so called morality police. Um, and they detained her and beat her up for having improper hijab. She ended up in a coma, later dying. Uh, Authorities claimed that it was for heart issues, but clearly it wasn't. It was due to her beating, and her family claimed that she had no health problems. And so, similar to like George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, she kind of sparked this movement in Iran, um, where now young girls and boys are, on the streets protesting to kind of overthrow the Islamic regime, who is very violent and, uh, you know, not good. That's how I can put it. Um,
Mhm.
and so lots going on, very emotional. The world is kind of taking a stand on it too. Everywhere is all over the world. There's been protests and a lot of movement happening. But we're still, I guess, waiting for that big change so people in Iran, such as our families, can have their freedom and their right to basic human rights. Um, that again, I'm curious to know for your experience, but ever since this has been happening, so it's been like 2 or 3, I want to say almost 3 weeks or 3 weeks now. Um, a lot of emotion has come up for me. A lot of like questions have come up for me. Just having my family there has been like an entire thing within itself. How has it been for you? Has it brought up questions for you as well, and you know whatnot?
Yeah, the whole situation in Iran, for me personally, has just kind of reiterated how much privilege we have here that we take for granted, and just wishing that same privilege for our people in Iran. Just something as simple as being able to pursue my career in music here is like impossible pretty much for women in
Mm,
Iran, because it's seen as improper or whatever. Who knows what
mm,
these guys are even
yeah,
thinking. But I think as women, from what I understand, you're only really allowed to be like a background singer, like for a male artist, from what I
mm,
understand. There's a lot of restrictions. But anyways, so that's for me from a personal standpoint. In general, I'm just amazed by the bravery that we're seeing coming out of Iran, especially from all the young people there. Like you're seeing all these um protests by like literally high school girls, like teenage girls, just like being so brave and just like having had enough, like enough is
mm,
enough. We demand change, and that's so amazing to see. And it is one of those movements where us continuously talking about it and bringing light to it is helping. Like sometimes people wonder, like, oh, I'm just posting on social media, is this really making a difference? But in this case, this is actually, as somebody outside of Iran, that's the best thing you can do. That, and like put pressure on our governments to seize assets of people who are part of the corrupt Iranian government, who live here in the States and the Europe freely, and use the money that they've stolen from the Iranian people. Like put some pressure on them to freeze those assets, and make life harder for them in the way that they've
yeah,
made it hard, or at least give them a little bit of a taste of the horrors that they've inflicted upon people in Iran.
yeah, exactly. Um, 1000%. And yeah, I guess it's really difficult being on the outside because you're like you said, like, oh, is posting really doing anything? But they can't circulate information because their internet's
Exactly.
cut out. So what we can do is use our basic everyday
Hmm.
benefit of internet and do what we can. Um, but yeah, definitely. In terms
And
of, yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I also know that it's even people who have like strong ties to Iran, who go back there a lot, but live outside of Iran, they are risking a lot right now, by posting, because like you're kind of making it potentially dangerous for yourself to be able to go back to Iran in the future. But that's just the point that we've come to. Like we're just done with this. Like we all have to be a bit brave right now, and do it for the greater good, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And it's go crazy. Yeah, that's a reality of, yeah, by me posting on the social media, it could mean that I could never. And like that's been the reality for tons of
Hmm.
journalists and actors or actresses who have fled the country, um, such as like Masih Alinejad and
Hmm.
Gochifte Faroni, I think that's what her name
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. Who, and they even living in the States now or wherever they are, they're still at risk because Iran sends private agents to try to get them kidnapped and detained so they can
Yeah.
do whatever to them.
Even I heard in Vancouver, during the protests, they had somebody with a camera, like filming people, and then the protesters started to try to get that person out of there, trying to explain to the police, like, please, like this person is putting our life in danger. And eventually, like they were like, well, we can't really detain him for that. Like I don't think they really understood the gravity of what was going on. But
Right.
eventually he was like escorted out. So yeah, like they definitely have their people outside of the country as well.
Yeah, it's crazy how much power.
Yeah, but it just shows you how much power we hold as well with our
Totally.
voice. They really don't want
Yeah.
people to talk about it. So the
Yeah.
more we talk about it, the better.
Yeah. What's really, really amazed me this whole time has been, like you said, young teenage girls
Hmm.
standing up to these people, these men and people in power, and at such a young age. And it's just, and so many of them have passed away, unfortunately. But it's just like it's just the bravery is unreal. It's
Hmm.
unreal the amount of courage these girls have, and it amazes me every day. And to even be associated them slightly makes me so incredibly proud, and I just want
I
to like
know.
scream it from the rooftop.
I know Persian women are not to be messed with.
Yeah, definitely
Persian women
not.
and girls. Yeah, and it's great to
Yeah.
see that there's obviously a lot of the support from the men in the country as well, because,
Hmm.
well, first of all, they're seeing how women are being treated, but at the same time, it's now turned into like a, zanzendegi azadi, like it's for general freedoms in Iran that they've been denied for so long.
Woman like freedom. Yep,
Mm.
that's I wore my pin today
Yeah, I noticed that.
for the I got it at a protest here in Ottawa. So you were traveling recently, is that right?
I was, yeah, I went to
Yeah. Where?
London, and then to Austria and Germany.
How was that?
It was fun. Well, like obviously we kind of the entire time we kind of had what's going on in Iran in the back of our
Right.
minds. But
Right.
the reason actually we went to London was really interesting. My mom is in a Persian ensemble. They called Hazarova, and they were
Cool. Okay.
invited to go on the TV show Chan Shanbe Vasina.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, and when they arrived there that same day, they got a call from the producer, being like, considering everything that's going on right now in Iran, we would like to kind of change the format of our episode and kind of focused it around like women in Iran and women artists in Iran. And so I accompanied them and they did their interview and their live performance. And after that, we decided to go to Austria and visit my family that's still there. They now live in southern Austria, right by the Italian and Slovenian border. And then I went and I did my own kind of solo tripping. I like kind of traveling by myself sometimes too. So I went to Vienna and kind of saw it again for the first time in over 12, 13 years. And then I went to Germany just because I had some extra time and decided to do some sightseeing there too.
Amazing. Wow. How was going back to Austria after all those years?
It was interesting. I thought I would have had more of an emotional reaction than I did, but maybe it's because I kind of built it up in my head. I went back. I had one day where I went back to all of my old school, my apartment that we used to live in and stuff, and it was really cool to see. But at the same time, I guess what I got from it was catharsis because I kind of realized like, as much as at the time when we moved, I wasn't happy about it. I'm very happy that we did now because
Mm.
I feel like, obviously, no offense to like if I was in Austria, I would be a very happy person as well. But I feel like for the things that I want to achieve in my life, being where I am allows me a lot of upward mobility. So that was kind of a. I told my mom I was like, "Thank you for doing what you did.
Yeah,
It can't have been easy, but thanks for doing
definitely.
that."
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess with more opportunity and
Yeah,
with
just the
music.
proximity to the music, the general music
Yeah,
industry and stuff.
yeah, amazing. Have you
Mhm.
ever had conversations with your mom or your parents about their experience moving and adjusting to a whole new culture and what that was like for them at the age of 20 and whatever?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I realized growing up that it was never something that we would sit down and just talk about. It would just come out in like random anecdotes. And I'd be
Mhm.
like, what? Like
Yeah.
they'd bring up this like really random thing. And I'd be like, oh, okay. I had no idea. It's like when you get older and all the family secrets and stuff start slowly
Yeah.
coming out. But like, my family in Iran, my grandpa was a politician during the Shah era. And so, because of that, at the time during the revolution, they were trying to get rid of everybody who was, involved in that government, and also, like intellectuals, professors, all these people. So they basically had no choice but to leave. And still to this day, they kind of talk about the Iran that they knew, and they still miss it. Like even though they've been out of the country for so long, I think they all kind of wish that they could go back sometimes and have it be. I mean, obviously, not to say that it was perfect under the Shah regime either,
Right. Yeah.
but just you talk to different Persians from that era, and they'll give you different experiences. But
Right.
for them, it was a happy life that they lived there, and they
Mhm.
wish that they could go back. And obviously, they don't want it to be how it was then. They want like a true democracy for Iran.
Right.
But yeah, they talk about it with a lot of passion, with a bit of sadness as well.
Mm.
Every time we talk about it.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think of pre-revolution Iran. And like you said, it definitely wasn't perfect. It definitely has
Hmm.
its flaws. I think it's a little glorified in today's light. Everyone's like,
Yeah.
oh, like this, like, I don't know if you've seen, but like videos on Instagram, it just shows like, oh, this was Iran before the revolution. And then,
I've seen that. It's like women in bikinis and stuff, and
yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's cool. But I think it kind of sometimes does ignores the fact that there were a lot of women that were kind of left behind by that
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
And
exactly.
so it's just more complicated than the way it's portrayed. Like
Exactly.
it does seem like overall people did have more freedoms then, so I
Hmm.
won't deny that. And like
Definitely. Yeah.
obviously women were able to hold more positions of power
Hmm.
and stuff. But I think the general consensus is that that was better than it is now, but we still want
Hmm.
something better than what it used to be even before.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Because yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, and it's so weird to see those images, and to hear the stories. I remember my dad telling me that Iran was like the France of the world at the
yeah, that's what
time,
my
and like,
parents say too.
yeah,
And the
like
Persian
people.
passport was like worth a lot, and
Yeah,
yeah. Hmm.
exactly. And to go to Iran was like to go on a super cool like trip and to
Hmm.
see the country and whatnot. And it's really hard for me to comprehend because obviously of what I've experienced of it and what it is right now. But yeah, seeing the images and whatnot, it's really interesting to compare. But also you have to keep in mind that there's more to a photo. There's
Yeah.
definitely more going on.
Again, it's like the idea of that we're not a cultural monolith. Like
Yeah,
it's so complicated, and different
exactly,
people, people from different backgrounds had different experiences
exactly.
during that time as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just so great to see how galvanized people are in Iran right now. There was like protests in all the provinces in Iran
Hmm.
at some point, and that's
Yeah,
super cool.
yeah. Again, it's insanely
Hmm.
brave and so much courage that those people have. Um, yeah, and I think it's important to shine a light on immigrant parents because they're the ones who did it all. If it
Yeah.
weren't for them, a lot of us or myself wouldn't have the life that I have. And like you said, with everything going on, it's definitely a privilege check and a uh, one thing that really stuck with me was a post that I saw on Instagram, but it was having this constant feeling of guilt and gratitude because you
Yeah,
feel
I grew
so
up a very guilty child. Even
right.
even
Yeah,
though I don't think that was my parents' intention, but
definitely
I
not.
felt I
No.
felt like when I wasn't grateful for something in the way that I
Mm,
guess I felt like I should have been, I felt very guilty about
mm,
that. Yeah.
yeah. No. Yeah. Definitely. And this is yeah. No. Definitely. A good point you bring up is something you're like, oh, I guess I should be happy that I have this right, but then it's like an instance, for instance, an example, I guess, would be uh, self-image issues. Like I had a ton
Mm-hmm.
of self-love and like body image issues and whatnot. I still do. Um, but then the guilt comes in of like, oh well, at least like I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it, but
Yeah, no, and like again, like going back to sort of one of the maybe things that I would
mhm,
maybe say is a bit of a criticism of our culture is how
yeah,
openly we talk about other people's bodies. I don't
yeah,
know if that's in your family too, but that
yeah.
certainly didn't help me with my self-esteem
No,
growing up, and I did have to lay down some boundaries there with my family, which have been respected. So it's just about that open communication. I'm lucky to be in a family where obviously they respect me, and they thought they were doing it for a good reason, but
Yeah.
I don't know if they understand it still, but I think they just know to like that doesn't
Yeah.
help me when they talk to me
Nuh-uh.
like that.
No.
Oh, like, oh, you've gained weight. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, true. That's a very
Yeah.
common, yeah, especially like at like women parties, you know, like how
Yeah.
everything's segregated. I don't know if have you been to Iran?
Unfortunately, only when I was 2. I would love to
Okay.
go visit. Like, I'd like to
Mm,
do a trip where I see all my, because I still have a lot of family there, not immediate
interesting.
family, but
Okay.
still family that like we stay in touch on social
Right.
media, and stuff like that. And then I'd love to see the country itself too, because
Mm,
we just have so much cool history. So
right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, interesting. That must also be like weird for you, having again, like you have so many ties to it, but
I've
not
just
having.
been, yeah, my idea of Iran is like what I've been told by my parents,
Mm,
and then what I see on
mhm,
social media, and then like I have a few friends who like grew up there.
mhm,
And so they will tell me what it's like now. And most of them always say, oh, you should come visit, it's fine. And like obviously, I would like to. I guess maybe I'd like to go with somebody who like is familiar with the
mhm.
place, and I'd probably feel more confident in that way.
Definitely. Yeah, I think a stigma that needs to be broken is that if you go there, especially as like a woman, is like you're gonna be detained and you're gonna,
Mm-hmm.
be imprisoned. I mean, with the movement happening right now, it's a whole different story. But I remember even like myself, like growing up and wanting to go back, like I was always a little scared. I would go and then I'd be held at the
Yeah.
airport for
Right.
something.
That's my fear as well,
Yeah,
but I understand. Again, now is a different scenario, but in
yeah.
general, I think
But
it's more talked about than it actually happens. But
yeah, exactly. And then every time I would go and visit, it was always for my experience, it was always smooth sailing, and I would always come back feeling so great and like connected to my
mhm.
roots again. It was a really great feeling.
How
But
do you deal with the tarof? Are you good at tarofing?
it's been engraved in me. So
Yeah.
I mean, even like for English speakers who don't know what Tarot is, oh, how do you even? I wish there was an English word
It's
for
this
it
like
because
cultural expect. I don't know. Like, it's this like culturally
yeah,
ingrained way of behaving around people that's like
I guess it's like
overly polite and
yeah, and being so selfless. It's just like
exactly, yeah.
yeah,
And a lot of the times it is genuine because
mm-hmm,
like for example, even visiting my family right now in Austria,
mm-hmm,
the first thing they always try to do is like feed you, refuse to let you pay for a single thing that you guys do,
mm-hmm.
are like just constantly worried about like are you having a good time, are you
Yeah,
happy, are you well
exactly.
fed, like do you
Yeah,
have
yeah, yeah,
everything you
yeah,
need. And I honestly genuinely like would be concerned that I would come across as rude in Iran,
yeah,
even though I don't mean to be, because I
yeah.
would just be worried that like culturally I did grow up around Taruf and stuff, but
Mm-hmm,
I feel like sometimes might miss some of the things. And then
mm-hmm.
that makes me kind of concerned that they would think I'm rude or or
No, I know
something.
exactly what you mean. It's so interesting. Yeah, like an example of Tarif would be like, say there was one cookie left on the table between you and and I'd be like, no, you have
Mhm.
it. And then you'd be like, no, you have it. And I'm like, no,
Yeah,
you have it. Or like
yeah.
paying for the bill. Like, I got it. You're like, no, I got like, please, like,
Yeah, the
and you
whole
just go
bill
on
thing
and
is
on.
like a whole fight. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's been really interesting for me because so in my so when I moved here at 6, like I when we came to Canada, we found like our family Persian friends and whatever. So I was kind of still in Persian culture, surrounded by Persians and Persian culture and taught of. Um, but then I remember the first time that I experienced like no Taruf was with one of my white friends, and it was
Yeah, the
like the
code
same.
switching is real.
Yeah,
You have
it
to
was
code
like the
switch.
same thing of like it was like the final piece of something. Like say it was a cookie again. And I was like, "Oh, like you have it." And she was like, "Okay." And she didn't go like, "Oh no, you have it." And I was like, like I was like, "Wait, you're not
I
gonna
once
offer it back?"
I
Yeah.
once lost my entire sticker album that I like treasured in
No.
elementary school because my like
Yeah.
classmates, I took it to school to show to my friends. My classmates were like, "Can I have that?" And I was like, sure. And then they like literally, I still remember they like attacked my sticker album.
Yeah.
And then my mom picked me up and I was like in tears.
Yeah.
She was like, why did you let them do that? And I'm like, well, I thought that we had to like, you know,
we
be
have
nice.
to.
Yeah. And then I think I
That's
got
so
a bit of a
funny.
lesson on like code
Yeah.
switching and the
Yeah,
importance of,
exactly. It's so
yeah, not that I knew that term at that point, but just realizing that you have to
that's
sort
a
of
new
take
one
the
for me
cultural
actually
things in
right
it.
now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You have to like take the cultural
Yeah.
aspects in mind based on your
Interesting.
interactions with
Yeah.
people.
Code
Yeah.
switching. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so relevant and so true. Yeah, and especially, yeah, I don't know, being a college student and a university student now, it's the hardest thing because, for instance, like we go out to dinner with my friends and I'm like, oh, I wish I could like treat everyone, but
I
like I
know.
have to pay
Yeah.
rent, you know, like I
Mhm.
can't like,
Yeah.
but like it's like my instinct is to be like, no, I
Mhm.
got it. Like,
Mhm.
and you know, try to it's almost like taking care always and doing
Yeah.
what you can to make that person feel um comfortable and like you said, well fed and whatnot. Yeah, so that's been my experience with Taro. Definitely
Yeah.
have to keep him. Yeah, I guess I have him code switching whenever I'm like home with my family. It's
Also, just
different, you know.
like our language can be so dramatic sometimes. Like I'll just like
Mhm.
say thank you to my aunt and she'll be like, oh fat that's besham, or like oh
Yeah.
like it means literally like I would die for you.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
like that's something I haven't really incorporated into my language.
Yeah.
Like all I really say is like "Khoda na kone," or you know, like
Yeah.
I hope to God not, or you know, like
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, like I'm like, should I be saying that more?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
should I be going around saying I will die for you?
Yeah, and it's so funny because every time I'm like on the phone with relatives and I like use the phrases like that of like, oh, like I would die for you, like
Yeah.
whatever. It's like I over dramatize and say it, and my aunts and stuff they like lose their minds laughing. So like, oh, like no, like I hope not, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was like, oh yeah, one slogan in Farsi. You know when someone calls you beautiful and you're like Chishma Khashai Mibine?
Yeah.
Have you heard that one?
Mm-hmm.
So in English, that literally translates to your eyes see pretty. And
Yeah.
so whenever my friends give me like whenever my friends give me compliments, they're like, "Oh, you look so pretty." I'm like, "Your eyes see pretty," and they're all like, "What?" And I'm like, "No, that's like I'm like, oh, it's just like a Persian saying that I'm translating to
Right. And
English."
they're like,
And
what are you
they're like,
talking about?
"Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly." It's so
Um,
funny.
I saw this Persian meme, like I think it was a
Mhm.
couple years ago now, but it's just such a specific thing. It was like when somebody calls you topol without adding mopol. and like how do you even explain that in English?
That's
It's
so
like
funny. Yeah, it's mopon is. I don't think that's a word.
like topol is like chubby or like yeah,
Yeah,
but then you add
chubby. It's
mopol
like
and it
chubby
means
mubby,
yeah, but
but
it
like
means
no one
like
says that.
cute, like topol. That's like when I think I last time I heard somebody call me that was when I was a kid. The picture was like this like chubby golden retriever puppy. It was like when somebody calls you topol without the mopol. So it's basically like topol is just chubby, but then you add mopol, it's
Right.
like cute, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. It's like sugarcoating it a little bit, so it's
Yeah.
not like taking a jab at you. No, that's so funny. Yeah, when they say, yeah, no, those memes are. I remember when I first came across like Persian memes and like whatever, I was like, oh, this is so funny. Like when you don't. I mean, it's like this in a lot of cultures, but it's like when you don't leave the chicken out or the meat to like thaw, and then
Yeah.
like your mom's like, did you put the meat out? And you're like, yeah,
Like
like running to
bolting to
the.
the microwave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So good. Yeah, yeah, again, it's lovely connecting, and I love having conversations with other Persian girls. I don't know if this was your experience, but I grew up with primarily white friends,
Yeah,
and
same.
my only connection to like Iran and my culture was either through my family and like mainly my sisters, my
Hmm.
older sisters, and we'd have a lot of conversations about because we were the only ones who understood, you know, our each other's experiences, and
Yeah.
it was, and then you know, and at a certain point in different times in your life, your friends become closer to you than your family, you know, because you spend more time with them, you see them
Hmm.
more often and whatnot. So I felt there was a lot of times where I felt kind of alone, you know, because I didn't really know who I could relate to, and then that's why I love conversations like these because I'm like, oh, like there are girls like out there, and especially with the movement and what's going on now. Posting stuff on my story, a lot of girls have responded. Persian girls specifically responded, and said certain things, or like, oh, like I relate to this so much, and I'm like, oh, like
Yeah.
I love that you can, find your story within mine. So it's really beautiful in that sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I grew up in a primarily like white neighborhood, both in Austria and in Vancouver. I'm very lucky to have a more kind of friends of different backgrounds now,
Mhm.
but it's always nice to connect with people from your culture. And what I actually find interesting is like our similarities, but also our differences in our experiences. Like I'll
Mhm.
have friends that moved from Iran from different ages, and then like sort of their families have like different expectations of them, and they
Mhm.
themselves are a different blend of like the Iranian culture and the Canadian culture, but we all get
Yeah,
along, we all
yeah,
appreciate each other's differences too.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I would say in high school for me, I came across like more friends from different backgrounds. For instance, I one of my best friends is Turkish, and our
Hmm.
stories are so similar. Like we immigrated at the same time, but she's Turkish and I'm Persian. That's
Hmm.
and one of my friends who's from France and whatnot. So it's beautiful to see making those connections here when we all come from different parts of the world and kind of
Yeah.
finding each other here is really nice and people to talk to. So I think it's really important. Um, Kind of going back to your music, I'm curious to know how you got into, because you said you're R&B
Hmm.
soul. How what was your main influence? Like, what did you listen to growing up that kind of propelled you into creating music that you do?
I always had like a pretty eclectic taste right from the beginning, probably just because of like my parents' influence. So they would listen to a lot of contemporary Persian music. Like you mentioned Agayiruz, like Faramaz Aslani was one of the main CDs we always had spinning in my car, or
Mm,
like Gugush and Daryush and people like that. But then I also was a big fan of like when I was really young, I loved like Michael Jackson, for example, or like
mm,
the Spice Girls were big when I was younger. And then later in high school, I got into like a rock phase. I was like that, like hippie classic rock girl for a little while. I still love that kind of music, but then a bit later in life, I got really into R&B and soul, and I found that my voice fit in that category really well too.
mhm,
And I just loved like the runs and stuff that you find in
mhm,
that genre of music because it's kind of reminiscent of like because we have a lot of runs in our music as well. It's just like
mhm.
almost every phrase is
Yeah.
accented with some kind of a run. And I think I was just kind of naturally drawn to that
Mm,
genre of music and started writing in that genre of music. But I still like to kind of explore. I feel like for example, I recently recorded a song that's way more like kind of soul rock, like Alabama Shakes, like Lake Street Dive. But I feel like that's still kind of in within that same overarching genre. So
yeah, very cool. Yeah, the runs in Persian music is very prominent. It's like, what do
yeah,
we call it? Cha-cha? Is that what it is?
I think so. I honestly
Yeah,
don't remember.
something something like that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
could be completely off, but yeah, when I was younger, I remember because I grew up listening to Celine Dion, and
Oh
then
yeah, I love Celine Dion.
Persian like music along, like it would be like the Celine Dion disc, and then like we'd play like Shaja Dion and whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, so like the differentiates, and I always thought it was like yelling. I didn't appreciate it when I was younger. I was like, why are they yelling
Yeah.
on the, like, it sounds like they're just like,
I
um
didn't appreciate it as much either until
yeah,
I got older. Yeah, I just thought
yeah,
it sounded
exactly.
sad and
Yeah.
yeah, yelly.
But
Yeah.
now I'm like, oh dang, this person can really sing, like
Yeah.
move their voice.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's really interesting. No, I one of the things that really stood out. First of all, your voice. Wow, your voice stood
Thank you.
out. It was like you can really like belt, and it.
Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful.
That was one of my favorite so far sound shows I've done. Your friends were so funny
Oh
too.
my god, it was awesome. No, it's so funny because I had met. I mean, they were people I met from work along with like a friend of mine, and I told them because I was working at the restaurant, and then I was working the So Far show come nighttime. And right before I was leaving work, I was like, "Oh, do you guys want to come? Like, it's just like a little concert, like at the brewery. You guys can come by." And they're like, "Yeah, sure." And then they came, and oh my god, yeah, they were obsessed with you. It was so fun. They held up your
I was
poster and
obsessed with
whatnot.
them. They were so funny.
Yeah, It was so good. Worked out so well. But I also really want to touch on this, your guitar playing and your
Oh,
electric
thank
guitar.
you.
How old were you when you started learning? And what
I
is,
started
yeah.
learning when I was around 15, 16 in school, but it was
Okay.
never like a proper education. We had this class in high school called guitar, but we'd literally like the teacher taught us like chords, like open chords, and he taught us bar chords. And then we were kind of left to our own devices. And like once a month, we'd have this thing called coffee house where we would
Okay.
pick a song and then play it for the class.
Cool. Okay.
I basically at the time became obsessed with being able to play the songs that I was listening to and then to be able
Mm,
to accompany myself while
mm,
singing. So I never really got like a formal education in guitar. I did in piano for until I was about 18, from about 10 to 18.
mm,
But with guitar, I kind of got to a point where I wanted to push myself further. And I do have like a lead guitar player who's just like crazy, like jazz. Like he would get shy if I about the way I talk about him, but he's
yeah.
like his name is Alvin Brennan. He's like one of the best guitarists I've ever met in my life. And
Wow.
because he knows what I can do, I said, hey, can we have a few lessons? And then we sat down. This was like a couple years ago. And he said, this is what you can do. This is what you need to work on. Like just very bluntly, not in like a mean way, but just
Yeah.
kind of like, I appreciate when your friends kind of just like that to you. Like he doesn't
Yeah,
need to
exactly.
sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
And so I basically practiced that. And especially during the pandemic when all the shows were canceled, I was kind of just like at home, just practicing my scales all the time. And I would do like this like routine of like scales, and then I
Mm,
would do like songs that I really wanted to learn that were maybe a little bit more complicated and more based on
mm,
riffs rather than chords. And then I basically came out of the other side of not that it's fully gone now, but like when things opened up again, being able to do a lot more on the guitar. And I'm very lucky now to also get hired by other
mm.
artists sometimes to play on their sets, and that makes me really happy because I
So
love being
fun.
involved in other people's projects too.
Totally. Yeah. No, that's so fun. And yeah, an instrument like a piano and guitar, just being able to dabble so much and come up with so many new melodies and whatever,
I
just
love it,
create.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I think that's the best part of an instrument. It's just
Mhm.
creation never stops with instruments. So it's awesome.
Yeah, and I love my jazz chords, so
Yeah, I
yeah,
was
I'm
gonna
sure you
say you
noticed
definitely
that.
have a jazz element to your music as well,
Yeah,
which I adore because
definitely.
I've as of last year I've been getting into jazz music a lot
Oh, cool.
more. So I loved hearing it. Um,
Thanks.
Congrats on your new single, by the
Oh,
way.
thank
I
you.
saw that you put out Anticipating.
I did, yeah.
Where did was that recorded in Vancouver?
It was recorded at my friend Braden Ragno's studio. It's
Cool.
called The Vibe Cave. I
Love
showed
it.
him that song a few years. It's like I wrote it like a few years ago. I started writing it with actually a Persian friend of mine. His name is Nojan Kamusi. And I took it to another friend of mine, Nathan Chu. He goes by Wafy. He's this like super talented producer, songwriter. Releases his own music under that same name. And they kind of helped me flesh it out. And then when I took it to the studio, Braden kind of had this vision of it being almost more like a dramatic kind of like almost like a R&B ballad kind of thing.
Mm,
And so the way we did it was he pulled this like old piano that they have in the bigger space into his studio and rigged it up, like mic'd it up. And then he had me playing and singing at the same time because he wanted it to have that organic feel. And it's actually in the song, it's kind of funny. Like sometimes you can tell I kind of lose the exact rhythm a little bit, like it will like slow down or speed, just like
mm,
kind of like a natural performance, like a
mm,
live performance. And
mm.
so that's kind of how we laid the foundation of the song. And then we had Jean Dulé, he's a great bass player in town. We had him come in, and then I was imagining all these like intricate vocal like harmonies, and so we ended up adding that, and then that was kind of basically it.
Love it. So fun. Must be so fun, like creating and adding some like different people to a song of yours and being like,
I love that, and I love the
yeah,
fact that music is such a like. I love writing and working with different people. It makes it a lot more fun for me. I
totally.
actually very rarely write songs by myself anymore. I'll come to
Mm,
somebody with an idea and they'll flesh it out with me. Like I've been writing a lot with Alvin Brennan, my lead guitar player. A
mm,
lot of the songs that are coming out in the future are going to be ones that I wrote with him, and then were produced by this amazing guy in town, Benjamin Millman. He's the amazing keyboard player, producer, like everything. Like he's so good. And I feel very grateful that I get to work with all these cool people and like call them
Yeah.
my friends too. It just
Yeah.
feels like, it doesn't even feel like work, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's when you know it's good. It's when
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I'm technically working right now, but I'm having the time of my life.
Yeah, exactly.
um, so I guess like from the sounds of it, you've really found like the right people in Vancouver and kind of the spaces and uh yeah, I guess the spaces to create and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, do you have plans on moving or do you plan on staying in Vancouver?
Yeah, so just to talk a bit more about the Vancouver music community, I think that
Mhm.
there's so many amazing people here, and so many different people that are involved in like different aspects of it, not just music, but are like actively trying to make Vancouver more like a better place when it comes to like
Mm,
arts and facilitating that kind of culture. So like one person that comes to mind for me is Ian Cromwell, who's also involved in politics
mm,
with like the One City a party here in Vancouver. And then like Christina Lau, who works really closely with businesses in Vancouver to try to
mm,
kind of create spaces where music and like business can meet. So like one thing that they organized was the Granville Promenade this year, which was
mm,
like a month-long, I think, outdoor festival on Granville Street that with the purpose of like showcasing the diversity in our music scene, but also, you know, increasing foot traffic in that region and stuff. And so that is to say, I feel like there's a lot of cool stuff happening here in Vancouver, and I'm happy that I've been able to be a part of the scene here. There are some, I do have some potential plans of moving to the States, at least for a few
mm,
years, because I do find that maybe for my kind of music, or even just like the time that I've spent there has been really rewarding for me. I feel like every time I've done something there, it's led to something like a step up, you know? So I'm just kind of seeing that as a sign that maybe I should spend a good amount of time there. So currently going through the whole application process, and it's a lot,
okay.
but got my fingers crossed that it works out.
Very cool. Yeah. And it'll be nice to, I guess, like explore somewhere new, but also, you can always come back home and
Exactly,
know
like
your
Vancouver
people.
will feel like home for a long time.
Yeah.
So um it's definitely not about like leaving for good or anything. It's
Yeah.
just kind of following my intuition.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. That's so exciting.
Thanks. I
What
hope
are
it
you
works out.
yeah, I'm sure it will. What are
Thanks.
you working on in terms of like are you writing stuff for more singles, EP?
Yeah, the plan for the next couple of months is to release a song. Probably saying every month is a bit ambitious, but 6 weeks to every 2 months, I have a new song lined up. So the next one's going to be out in November. It's a song that I did
Oh,
with Braden and
oh,
Ragno at the studio that I mentioned, and it was funded by Creative BC. So
mm,
very lucky to have their support. And I wrote the song with an artist named Dominic Fricot, who
mm,
was like a local, like a big local guy here. But he moved to Berlin. I don't know exactly when, but he's doing quite well for himself. And he comes back here every once in a while. We'll have like, you know, sold out shows at like Guilt and Co and places like that. So really happy to have been
cool.
able to write the song with him. That's the next one that's coming out in November. It's called Done Done Done.
Cool. Can't
hmm
wait. I'm
It's a
excited for
breakup
that.
song.
Yes. I love your song, Always Be My Never.
Oh, thank you.
I remember you performing that too, and then I
That's
listened
a
to it.
sassy one.
Yeah, I love it. Just like it's like a good, yeah, it's like a satisfying. I don't know. I feel like you can listen to it for so many different situations.
Thanks.
Love
Yeah, I
it.
wrote that one with my Brazilian friend. He
Oh,
goes by
cool.
Gabe SX. He's
Okay.
a guy that I met here, but he's from Brazil and he moved back there, and he's the one you can thank for all the cool like Brazilian chords
Cool.
that are in that song.
Love it. Love it. Ugh,
Mhm.
amazing. I'm so glad we had this conversation. I don't want to keep you for too long because we have hit the hour
No, I've
mark,
had an
but
amazing time. Thank
it's
you.
been, yeah, again, like I think this was it was so fun, and I'm so glad we got to bring up different parts of our stories, and
Mhm.
hopefully there's girls out there, guys, whoever out there who listen and can find similarities in their paths and feel like they got us and they're
Exactly.
not alone. Yeah, we're still repping the woman life freedom. I'm praying for everyone in Iran. I'm so
Mhm.
excited for your endeavors and
Thank
where
you.
your music is gonna go. I'm really, yeah, I'm so excited for you. And I think that
Thank you.
with all and I love that you perform so much. I think that's such a great way of,
Thanks.
not only meeting people, but getting people to know who you are and bringing more light to your wonderful music. So I'm really excited for
Thank
what you
you.
do.
And hopefully
Yeah.
one day we'll be able to perform in Iran, and
Yeah.
anyone who wants to will be
Beautiful.
able to
Yeah.
perform there too.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I would, yeah, that would be a dream to see you
Mhm.
performing around. I would
That'll
love
be
that.
emotional for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So a closing question that I do for all my guests is song of the day. So
Mhm.
it can be like your song of the day. It can be a song of yours. It can be a song that you listen to. It can be a song, any song, just your song of the day.
A song that I've been listening to a lot.
Yeah, anything. Yeah, it could be like based on like sometimes you can do it based on the weather. You're like, oh, like today looks like a thing. I'm gonna have this.
Oh,
Weather,
gotcha.
But anything you want. Yeah.
Well, the new Beyonce album has had like a hold on me for the
Yeah.
past month. So
Cool. Okay.
I'll say Plastic Off the Sofa off of that album.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
I'll have to check that. I haven't had a chance to give it a full listen through, but I
The
think
runs on that song are insane too.
really?
So
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Okay. My song of the day is gonna be Always Be My Never, because
Oh,
I think it's only fitting.
Yay.
And I just love that tune. So for those
Thank you.
listening who haven't checked it out,
It's definitely one of my
Tissa
favorite songs that
so
I've
good.
written.
I love it. It's so cute.
Thanks.
Again, thank you so much for having
Thank
this
you.
conversation. This was so fun. I'm gonna end it on here, but don't leave the call.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for listening, everyone, and I hope everyone has a great and healthy day. Okay, bye. Okay.